Hey everyone, Nick Espinoza, your Chief Security Fanatic here, and today we are actually talking about Facebook again because Facebook has decided that Holocaust denial pages are recommended content. Now, this speaks obviously to a larger issue we have with social media, and this is what's going on. So this is just kind of mind-blowing to me, but I think it opens up a rather serious question, basically, or a discussion on what is and is not considered hate speech. And here's what's going on according to Sky News. Now, last week, and this article was published today, Facebook pledged to crack down on anti-Semitic content, but it does not categorize Holocaust denial as hate speech, and this is according to think tank ISD, or the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. This means that such posts then are spreading prolifically throughout Facebook. Now, ISD found hundreds of thousands of users across 36 different Facebook groups, basically in its research. Now, here's where it gets scary. After its researchers clicked through all of these groups, Facebook then began recommending further Holocaust denial pages, meaning they had gone through a whole bunch of groups looking at Holocaust denial, and then Facebook's AI algorithm basically kicked in and said, hey, we recommend these groups. You like this Holocaust denial group? Here's a whole bunch more. That's what we're talking about here. And that is obviously a very serious issue. Now, Jacob Davey of ISD, he's a senior research manager, told The Guardian, and I quote, Facebook's decision to allow Holocaust denial content to remain on its platform is framed under the guise of protecting legitimate historical debate, but this misses the reason why people engage in Holocaust denial in the first place. Now, we will get to the quote-unquote protecting legitimate historical debate because we're going to focus on that. But to continue, the researchers also found that Holocaust denial content on other social media platforms, including YouTube, Twitter, and Reddit, often promoted the term holohoax, and that was quite okay. We're going to stick with Facebook here at the moment because otherwise, I would probably spend an hour talking to you here on this with various platforms, but let's focus on Facebook. Now, a spokesperson for Facebook said, and I quote, "We take down any post that celebrates, defends, or attempts to justify the Holocaust." Obviously, that is not the same as denying the Holocaust. Justification is a different thing. To continue, and I quote, "The same goes for any content that mocks Holocaust victims, accuses victims of lying, spews hate, or advocates for violence against Jewish people in any way. We also remove groups and pages that discuss Holocaust denial from recommendations and references to it in research predictions." Obviously, on an aside, that's not what ISD found. But to continue with their official statement, and I quote again, "While we do not take down content simply for being untruthful, many posts that deny the Holocaust often violate our policies against hate speech and are removed." And that seems like a bit of a loophole there, in the sense that while many of them, let's say, may violate the terms and services, those that for whatever reason say, hey, I'm simply questioning this, fly under that radar. And again, I'm not going to sit here and adjudicate the Holocaust, but this is a huge, huge issue. Now, what compounds this problem for Facebook is that a number of countries where Holocaust denial is actually illegal, such as Germany, no surprise there, France, and Poland, Facebook does actually prohibit that content, but apparently in countries that don't have that law, like the United States, they allow it to proliferate. So I think this is interesting from the standpoint of what exactly is and is not acceptable on a social media platform. As I mentioned just seconds ago, I'm not going to adjudicate the Holocaust here, because that is just bonkers. But I think we have to understand the line of what is and is not hate speech, what is and is not acceptable to adjudicate on a social media platform. And that is a very, very serious issue here. Now, my thought here is basically on just how arbitrary these standards can be, not just for Facebook, but for all of social media. Basically, The standards are set by the views of the leadership of each organization. In this case, we're talking about Facebook. So perhaps Mark Zuckerberg, who was actually raised Jewish and, according to Wikipedia, in my research, had a Star Wars themed bar mitzvah, is okay with this, not necessarily because he agrees with Holocaust denial. I can't imagine him being Jewish would agree with that, but he's either more libertarian than he lets on, meaning even if it offends him, he's going to protect that right to talk about Holocaust denial, or, and I think this is more likely the case, his drive for profit outweighs everything, including his upbringing in that case. According to Wikipedia, he was raised Reform Jewish, so, here we are. I'm actually not knocking him, though, for his views here, whatever they are, but I think we have to have a discussion on things like this for basically a multitude of things, not just Holocaust denial, but we can look at QAnon as well, which Facebook has in the last couple of weeks taken a rather aggressive stance on, which surprised a lot of people because Facebook has basically been an anything goes kind of platform. You want to put out the most insane, crazy conspiracy theory, and Facebook has been cool with that, but they're getting a lot of pressure, not just from the media in general, but from the U.S. Congress as well, which I think is part of this. And so that is obviously a very serious thing. Now, obviously, I don't agree with Holocaust denial. I don't agree with QAnon. But in a similar vein, I have to ask, where do we draw the line between conspiracy theories that these people are espousing, like QAnon, for example, versus the need to filter them as to not attract more people to their cause? And so I think that's what we have to talk about. And is it even right to deny, let's say, that expression, as much as I may agree with QAnon and Holocaust denial and all of that? Is it right to actually quash that because it's demonstrably false what they're putting there? And I think that's the question that we need to be asking ourselves, because I think basically if you're looking at this and you are thinking about your rational, most logical self, and I do believe that everybody needs to take a college course in logic here, before we talk about these kinds of things. And I could also put this in the same vein as disinformation for, the election in 2020, where we're seeing a whole bunch of misinformation and disinformation proliferate. The question is, where is the limit? Where is the line? How do we adjudicate this? So before I basically point the finger at Mark Zuckerberg, who is Jewish and saying he's wrong. And for the record, I literally did a video/podcast called "It's Time to Put Mark Zuckerberg in Jail" for everything he's done with Facebook. So please don't sit here and think I'm an apologist for any of this whatsoever. But I think we need to have that open and honest discussion. And I'm hoping that my feeds, basically my posts, my comment section, will basically be an honest discussion on where that limit is, because that's what we're talking about today. And it's under the backdrop of allowing the proliferation of Holocaust denial, which is bonkers to me, especially in the year 2020, when we have just a ton of actual evidence to dispute that. So there you go. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Let me know what you think, but that is your just crazy news for Monday. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.